he sold all of his family's assets, he still would not be able to buy the sword that was so valuable. After a while, Sir Gerhardt said that the family leader wanted to adopt Eugene into the main family. Eugene replies that he already knows about it because Sir Gilade told him earlier. With a sad face, Sir Gerhardt said that he hoped Eugene would enter the main family as an adopted child. He realized that this choice was the best for Eugene's future. But if Eugene enters, there will be a lot of trouble coming his way. Eugene casually said that he already knew about it. But his father also knew him since childhood. Eugene confidently says that he does not know the word surrender without a fight. The father was shocked to hear his son's words. With tears in his eyes and an expression full of pride, he holds his son's shoulder saying that the name Eugene was made by him and Eugene's late mother. He asked the son not to forget that. With a smile of pride, Eugene said he could not forget that. So even if he was the adopted son of the main family, his father was still Gerhardt Lionheart. After hearing his son's words, Sir Gerhardt returned to hug his son's body while shedding tears. He was moved to hear his son's words. Meanwhile, inside his head, Eugene realizes there might be a lot of annoying things going on in his life after being adopted. But the gains were far greater, so enduring all that trouble seemed small to Eugene. This kid didn't think about becoming the head of the Lionheart family. But no one will believe that, especially Sir Gilade's first wife, Theonis, and his second wife, Anacilia. The two of them must have been forced to be careful with Eugene. There are two ways that Eugene can think of to deal with complaints and attention from others. While thinking this, a sudden gust of wind blew and brought a thick layer of dust toward Eugene. This boy also drew his sword while thinking that he would ignore all the problems that came to him like that dust, or destroy everything that existed. Just like he was doing to the flying dust just now, the smile full of confidence on his face reflects his burning spirit. That day, Sir Gilade, the main head of the Lionheart family, invited all the children, as well as their families who participated in Bloodline Continuous, to a feast celebrating the victory of the reserve lineage, so instead of focusing on humiliating the main lineage, Sir Gerhardt, who was in the corner of the room, was suddenly greeted by two grown men who were Desera's father and Gargus. Desera's father praised Sir Gerhardt for having a son as great as Eugene. In fact, news about them becoming the main family had even reached Desera's father. Meanwhile, Gargus' father is busy promoting his family's muscle-building drug. Desera's father invites Sir Gerhardt to hold a meeting as the first member of the reserve lineage. Eugene chose not to join his father because he does not like being the center of attention. In another corner of the room was Cyan, who stood with a sad face accompanied by his mother. His mother always intimidated Cyan and asked him to stand up straight. Anacilia reminds Cyan that from now on he will always be compared to Eugene. He told his son that people would always think about Cyan losing the duel against Eugene, and then they would mock the main family for losing the Bloodline Continuous ritual for the first time. Cyan could only lower his head sadly at his own mother's words. Anacilia instead said that his son had no choice but to feel ashamed. But Anacilia asked his daughter not to feel hopeless, because no matter who mocked Cyan, he was still Anacilia's son and a direct descendant of Lionheart. Anacilia also reminds his son that Eugene can never be the head of the family, but Cyan must not be relieved by that, because there would be many other things that would hinder Cyan from becoming the head of the family. In the end, Anacilia asked Cyan to be friends with Eugene, and be a good brother to Eugene so that one day Eugene will help him. Cyan is willing to obey his mother's orders, but he is confused about how to start it. Meanwhile, Seal had gone one step ahead of his brother. With cake in hand, this girl approached Eugene asking, "Aren't they brothers now?" Eugene answered yes lazily. Seal kept chasing him and asked if Eugene could call her big sister. Eugene rejects the idea on the grounds that their ages are not that far apart. So Eugene doesn't want to call Seal big sister because they are only a few months apart. Seal complained because she had to call Cyan's sister even though they were only 5 seconds apart. Eugene explains that some things are different. Seal kept forcing Eugene to call her big sister, even just once. Seal kept pushing hard, but Eugene didn't respond, especially considering that Eugene is actually the reincarnation of a formidable warrior 300 years ago. Meanwhile, in Sir Gilade's study, there is Sir Loberian, who is saying that he cannot guarantee that Iota will become his student. He was the master of the Red Magic Tower specialized in summoning magic. Before becoming his apprentice, Iota had to undergo an aptitude test at Aeroth. Iota, who was standing beside his mother, asked what will happen when he gains the talent for summoning magic. Sir Loberian replied it was good news, but his status as Lionheart on Aeroth would have no effect. Unless Iota has more talent than any other wizard, then he can't just become Sir Loberian's apprentice. Iota answered yes with a sad face. However, Sir Loberian said he was an old friend of Sir Gilade, so Iota had plenty of chances. Sir Loberian also promised to protect Iota from people's criticism. He will also provide a place for Iota to practice magic according to his talent. Iota's face immediately lit up hearing that. In his heart, this boy already felt relieved even though he didn't have to become Sir Loberian's student. He is relieved to be released from this family that suppresses him so much and learns magic. Even so, Iota still tried to turn to his father for approval. Sir Gilade tells Iota not to worry about what to think. Sir Gilade just wants his children to determine their own destinies. Even so, the mother immediately stood in front of Iota and said that this was a good opportunity that the father had provided. So Iota had to accept it because ever since he was little, Iota was more interested in magic than swords and spears. The mother held Iota's small shoulders and intimidated his own son while saying that whatever path Iota chooses, he must remember that he is the son who is destined to become the leader of the Lionheart family. The mother's sharp gaze made the poor boy unable to budge. The mother kept asking Iota to remember this while in Aerof. Sir Gilade immediately called his first wife to stop bullying his own son. Theonis immediately let go of Iota and reasoned that she did this to encourage his child as a mother. Iota's mother could clearly see that Anasilia would be very happy to see Iota sent to Aerof. But Theonis had no other choice, because so far Iota was not born with the talent that matched his offspring. Iota is too innocent and weak. Because of that, Theonis thought it would be better for Iota to meet lots of wizards in Aeroth while getting stronger, and build connections that can help later. Once again, Theonis emphasizes to Iota that he is the legitimate child of Lionheart. In other words, Iota must not disgrace the Lionheart name. The boy was clearly distressed when he understood the meaning of his mother's words. The next day they actually saw off Iota in front of the main gate. Lobirian and Iota go to Aeroth. Children from other proposed lineages also return to their families with their family members. So the empty guest house is now occupied only by Eugene and his father, Sir Gerald. That day Eugene will learn about mana after his reincarnation. Mana development is divided into two categories, namely breathing and physical exercise. Breathing is a practice where you collect mana through breathing, while physical training is a way to collect mana by moving the body. Nothing is easy, but breathing techniques are much more difficult than physical exercises. Hamel used to practice mana with physical training techniques. Even then Sienna and Vermouth helped, so he also changed the technique to breathing with the suggestion of his two comrades. Finally, Eugene arrived at the edge of the forest, and there was Jin waiting for him. They would begin training right away upon entry into the deepest part of the forest, because in that forest there is spirit vine energy. This energy only exists in the main family forest, and only descendants of the main family are allowed to enter. This place was created by Vermouth himself 300 years ago. Just thinking about this makes Eugene think Vermouth is indeed a monster. Jin looked back and asked if Eugene was nervous. With a cheerful smile, this boy replied that he was very excited. Jin warns Eugene that this will not be easy. Jin will help him, but Eugene will still have a hard time because he just learned about mana. Jin said that the younger he was, the easier it would be to feel mana. Jin said that Seal and Cyan learned mana when they were 6 years old, and it took them 4 days to sense mana, while Iota takes about 1 week. Reserve offspring usually learn mana at the same age range as Eugene, and usually it takes 1 month just to feel the mana alone. But Jin suspects Eugene doesn't need that long, because there is Veen's spirit around them and Jin will help him. Eugene asks how many days does Jin think it will take him. Jin suspects it might take about 10 days. Eugene laughed at that. In his heart, this boy was determined to do it in just 10 minutes. Finally, the two of them entered a wooden hut in the middle of a shady forest. Once inside the hut, they entered again through a secret door that had a staircase leading down to the basement. Upon arriving at the secret room, Eugene was asked to sit in the middle of a wide altar. This boy complied and sat on the golden flame carving. Jin then explained that the main family's mana training method was a technique passed down from their ancestor, the Great Vermouth, because there is a rule that those who are not direct descendants of the main family cannot study it. But there are also those who break the rules and bring them down using the red flame method. Then Jin took mana out of his body saying that it was the real one, which only the main family can do. Instantly the mana around Jin's body surged like a lion's mane fluttering freely. That was the so-called mana control method White Flame. Eugene was stunned to see mana. He really couldn't remember the name of the technique, but he remembered this amazing sensation well. In the past, Vermouth had thick mana that always surrounded his body. The mana formed a sparkling white-colored flame. Looks beautiful like the lion's mane, the king of the jungle. In Eugene's previous life, he couldn't beat that fire. Now, Eugene sat concentrating in the middle. Jin said that since Eugene couldn't feel mana yet, they would practice breathing first. Eugene suddenly said that he could feel the mana. Jin was clearly shocked. This man suspected that Eugene was just imagining it, because it can only be felt in a very focused state. So Jin was going to test Eugene with a small ball of mana and prove that the boy was just imagining it. Jin tossed the tiny ball of mana and sent it circling Eugene. The young man smiled and suspected that Eugene would not know where it was. But suddenly Eugene said he felt the mana gathering on the left side of his face, right where Jin's ball was. Jin attempted another test by randomly moving the mana orb. But strangely, Eugene can always guess where the ball is, even when he closes his eyes. Finally, Eugene opened his eyes and asked how much longer Jin was going to test himself. Even this brat managed to precisely touch the location of that small mana ball. Jin really couldn't believe what he was seeing. He thought this was impossible. In his heart, Jin admits that Eugene is too great because he can sense Mana's presence in just 10 minutes. In the end, Jin laughed admiringly as he rubbed his head. Then he came down and sat cross-legged right in front of Eugene. Jin said that they could start their training now that Eugene could already feel mana energy. From now on, Eugene is asked not to talk and to focus on feeling what is happening inside his body. Jin held Eugene's hand and taught the breathing technique. Eugene was asked to feel the mana entering his breath as if he were inhaling the mana itself. Then Eugene was directed to direct mana with the white flame method from the heart towards the heart again. Jin let go of his hand after seeing Eugene slowly mastering this technique. Jin stepped away and looked from a more comfortable distance to assess the flow of mana in Eugene's body. This young man realized that Eugene was on a different level from the people he knew, because Eugene was able to stably cover his entire body with mana even though his body had just received mana. Jin was completely amazed by Eugene's ability. Meanwhile, Eugene is amazed by his own body's capabilities. This kid felt the crazy sensation of being able to feel and inhale mana again. Since he was someone who had memories from his past life, it was actually quite easy. But even without that experience, this body could very easily accept mana. He could even feel his mana increasing with every breath. But of course, there was a limit to how much mana his body could hold. When Eugene finally reached the limits of his body's capabilities, there was a shining star in his heart. Eugene immediately opened his eyes and looked so tired. Jin, who was standing in front of Eugene, noticed that the size of this child's core was different. Generally, the core star that shines in its heart will be smaller, and the owner must train diligently to increase its size. Jin reached out to Eugene asking if the boy was a monster. Eugene, who didn't understand the meaning of that sentence, asked back, "Does that mean a compliment?" Jin replied that of course, it was a compliment. After that, they returned to the mansion. While on the way back, Jin explained that the difference between lowering mana with the red flame or white flame method lies in the splitting of the core. So no matter how hard one tries to increase mana with the red flame method, the amount of mana in one's body would not increase. However, if one mastered the white flame method, one could split their core after reaching a certain point. That way one could maintain the mana within the body more efficiently, and the split cores will also resonate with each other to increase the power of the user. Jin explained that they refer to the core as a star. Founder of Lionheart and creator of the White Flame, the Great Vermouth has 10 stars. Only he was the only one who could reach 10 stars in the history of the Lionheart family. Jin proudly refers to himself as having 6 stars. Sir Gilade, his brother, also has 6 stars, while Iota, Cyan, and Seal only have 1 star. According to Jin's prediction, it is likely that the twins will rise 1 more star next year. Because the twins were introduced to mana at the age of 6, that means it took 8 years for them to rise from 1 star to 2 stars. Eugene asked how Jin thought about his rise later. The handsome young man replied confidently that Eugene could climb faster than the twins, even if Eugene is not lazy. With enthusiasm and a cheerful face, the boy said he would practice even more diligently from now on. Inside his mind, Eugene knew he had been reincarnated into a body much better than his previous body, so he wouldn't waste the chance to learn that mana. While walking, Eugene wonders if he will ever reach 10 stars. For now, he wanted to study the structure first. If something fits, he will change it according to his body's ability. Eugene thanked Vermouth in his heart, because thanks to this white flame method that Vermouth invented, he has many interesting things to try in the future. Now, in front of the Lionheart family palace, Jin asked Eugene to go rest immediately, because he will be reporting the results of Eugene's training to Sir Gilade. After Jin left, Eugene didn't really stick to his word. His tiredness won't stop him from doing something he's always wanted to do, because now he can use mana. He will do it soon. Suddenly, Eugene's personal butler arrives hastily. Without much ado, Eugene immediately asked his maid to get Wynneth in the room. After holding Wynneth and drawing the sword from its scabbard, Eugene was still unsure whether the contract would work immediately, but he wanted to give it a try anyway. Eugene closed his eyes and focused on the flow of mana into the sword. At this moment, suddenly a wind that was big enough to blow up the dust around it. Nina even panicked because she was almost pulled into the storm that suddenly appeared around Eugene. Within the storm that enveloped Eugene's body, a voice appeared and asked, was he Hamel? Eugene was taken aback by the question, but he knew very well who the voice belonged to. It was the voice of the elementary spirit king of wind, Tempest, and he was very surprised because Tempest knew Eugene's true figure. Tempest the Wind King immediately asked if Hamel was reincarnated. Eugene was surprised and asked how Tempest knew that he was Hamel. Tempest couldn't possibly forget Hamel's soul because he was a friend of Vermouth. No matter how much time had passed and his face had changed, his soul would still be the same. It had been too long since Tempest had been summoned via Wynneth. He had thought that the one who called him was a descendant of Vermouth, but then he felt Hamel's soul. At this second, Eugene immediately asked why Vermouth didn't immediately kill the remaining demon lords. He forced Tempest to speak, remembering he'd come along after Hamel died. Finally, the wind god replied that he did not know what Vermouth was planning. While fighting against the arresting demon lord, Vermouth suddenly sheathed his sword. Eugene was stunned to hear that, but Tempest continued his story that the battle in the Demon King's palace at that time was fierce. But the battle cost many lives. Only Vermouth and the arresting Demon King were left. Vermouth sheathed his sword and did not kill the Demon King. He also did not go to the castle of the Doomsday Demon King. Evidently, Eugene was furious to hear that. He immediately asked in a high tone what was the content of the pact Vermouth made with that demon lord. Tempest did not know the contents of the agreement. He said that only those who knew the contents of the agreement were at that location. Once Vermouth sheathed his sword, then Tempest couldn't intervene in that place. When Eugene wanted to ask more about the day's incident, Tempest said they didn't have much time left. He also said that in normal times, Eugene couldn't summon him at will, because Tempest forced open the door to communicate with Eugene. Now the communication door must be closed again. Before actually leaving, Tempest tells Eugene to call him back when he's had enough. Eugene was still screaming and demanding answers, though it was obvious Tempest wouldn't say anything more. A moment later, Eugene immediately fainted with a bloody nose. A panicked Nina tries to call him and wakes up Eugene. Eugene suddenly woke up and realized he was lying in his own room. But when he tried to get up, his head immediately hurt. Eugene realized this was the sensation of mana's exhaustion, because he had used all of his mana down to the last drop. Eugene just realized that elemental spirits actually remember entities through their souls. That's why Tempest called him Hamel. There was a feeling that nagged at Eugene's mind to think that he might not be Hamel's reincarnation. Rather, he was just someone whose memories overlapped with Hamel's. But with this now everything is clear. From what Tempest said earlier, he was indeed proven to be Hamel's reincarnation who carried the memories of 300 years ago. Suddenly Nina appeared from behind the door and asked if Eugene was alright. Eugene replies he is fine. Then Eugene asked how long had I been unconscious. Nina replied that it had been half a day. Then Nina said that there were Sir Gillade and Jin outside. Without many words, he immediately invited them both in. Sir Gillade and Jin looked really worried about Eugene. Sir Gillade immediately asked if Eugene had summoned the elemental spirits, considering there was a huge cyclone that appeared when Eugene swung the sword. Eugene fell silent with a serious face. He knew with a typhoon that big there would definitely be a lot of people looking at it. Eugene couldn't say all of the contents of his conversation with Tempest, but he had to give a bit of information to allay Sir Gillade's suspicions and the others. So Eugene told me that the Wind Elemental King had appeared. Eugene tells that the King of the Wind Element wants to see who he is because it has been a long time since he was summoned from Wynneth. Jin was dumbfounded, shocked. This young man said that there hadn't been a family member who could summon a wind elemental spirit since Vermouth had died. Eugene confirmed it. Eugene says that he can't summon elemental spirits for too long because he lacks strength. Eugene also tells the part of the elemental spirits who want to meet him again when he grows up. And that was all he told Sir Gillade and Jin at that moment. Sir Gillade laughed with satisfaction at how extraordinary Eugene was. The main head of the Lionheart family frankly praised the boy in front of him for what happened to him in the spiritual space. Eugene's ability to feel mana directly and the formation of a core with the white flame method alone was truly amazing. But Sir Gillade didn't expect that boy to attract the wind elemental spirit's attention. Eugene smiled broadly at the compliment. Then, Sir Gillade asked Eugene to rest for a few days. Only then could he continue his studies with Jin. Sir Gillade had planned to go and train himself again. But now, according to him, it is more important to train Eugene's talent. However, Eugene politely thanked him and said he didn't want to take up Sir Gillade and Jin's time. Jin didn't want Eugene to say that, because he likes to teach Eugene. After all, he was also going to start teaching the twins, Cyan and Seal. Hearing the names of the twins mentioned, Sir Gillade remembered the faces of his two children. Sir Gillade hopes the twins can look to Eugene for inspiration. Now, the twins Seal and Cyan are facing each other in the courtyard of the palace. In each of their hands was a sword, which they would use for training. Before that, Seal asked if Cyan had heard about Eugene, who now has a 1-star white flame, even though it took a long time for them to get 1 star. Cyan denied that point vehemently, because people say 1 month is pretty fast in their family history. But in their minds, they both realized that 1 day was too soon for Eugene to get another star. Without a word from anyone, the twins started running toward each other with swords drawn. The two of them unhesitatingly raised their swords to attack each other. This is how they usually practice every day. Meanwhile, in his room, Eugene, who realizes everyone has left, starts to get up from his bed and takes Wynneth. This boy drew his sword and summoned out a cute, sweet wind fairy. The elf was named Sylph, a low-class elemental that could be summoned with the mana he had now. Eugene tries to ask this elf if she heard from the king, The little elf was silent while looking at Eugene's face. She didn't say anything or show any emotion. Eugene rubbed his head in frustration. He was annoyed at not being able to communicate with the lower class elements. Finally, Eugene told Sylph to tell Tempest if she lies to Eugene, then she will kill the Wind Elemental King. Sylph scowled at that, even though she still flew out of the window, relaying Eugene's message to the king. Eugene returned to thinking that the only one who died in the Demon King's castle of captivity was him. The other 4 team members, including Vermouth, returned from Helmuth safely. However, only Vermouth and the Demon Lord of Captivity know the contents of the agreement. One day, Eugene must explore Helmuth to unravel this mystery. Not even just Helmuth. He also planned to explore Aeroth where Sienna lived. Uriz is where Annis lives, and Luhar is where Malin lives. Because if he went to those places, he would know the fate of his old comrades. Eugene looked down at his small palms and realized he couldn't travel far with such a small body. But one day Eugene plans to explore all those places. Now, Eugene is standing in front of a long mirror while staring at his stocky, muscular body. He said the time had passed quickly. Now Eugene Lionheart is already 17 years old. He smiled at the mirror, saying his body was pretty good already. Even though he trained mana every day, he was still amazed by the results. Now, Eugene has reached 3 stars in the White Flame method. But according to Eugene, it is still not enough. He had to utilize his beautiful and well-built body to surpass his past self. Eugene said he wanted to go to Aeroth to study magic. Cyan, who was sitting by his side, was astonished to hear that. Eugene then told me that this morning he was training the White Flame as usual. Then he can do something unique. Eugene spun the 3 stars within his heart and created a tremendous mana flutter around his body. Cyan was trembling in disbelief at the impossible sight before his eyes. He wondered how Eugene could do that, considering that the young man only knew were 7 years after Cyan. Cyan can't believe that Eugene has managed to get 3 stars while he is still holding on to 1 star. With a smile full of pride, Eugene replied that it was possible because he was a genius. Cyan was getting annoyed hearing Eugene's words, which were full of arrogance, so he wanted to kill Eugene. But Eugene knew he couldn't possibly do it. Cyan is annoyed because he has been beaten every morning by Eugene. But Eugene denied it because all this time it was Cyan who always asked to train with him. Eugene asks Cyan to stop taking him to train if he continues to complain like he is now. Cyan looked away hearing Eugene's words. He diverts the conversation by asking why Eugene suddenly wants to practice magic. Cyan reminds Eugene about what happened to Iota. After going to Aeroth to study magic in the time after Bloodline Continuous, his talent wasn't strong enough to become Sir Loberian's apprentice. Although Iota managed to enter the Red Tower with the Insider's Path, he was unable to achieve any significant achievements. Even now that 4 years have passed, Iota is simply taking advantage of the tower's compassion. Eugene immediately turned scared when he commented that Cyan's mouth was very venomous when talking about his own older brother. But Cyan persisted because it was a reality. Cyan prevents Eugene from acting arrogant by saying he will still study magic while living in their palace. Cyan said if Eugene left, Seal would definitely be sad. Hearing that, Eugene actually threw away his weapon and said that's good considering that all this time Seal had become quiet and liked to practice alone. When asked by Cyan where are you going, Eugene casually replies he wants to see the head of the family, talks about his wishes, and reports his 3 stars. After Eugene left, Cyan could only kick his sword in annoyance. He was annoyed that Eugene was up again and would display feats that could surpass him again. Sir Gilade was very surprised when Eugene came to ask permission to study magic. Sir Gilade could hardly even believe it. The head of the Lionheart family was even more shocked when he heard that Eugene wanted to go to Aeroth. Even though he only reached 3 stars, Sir Gilade wants Eugene to continue to hone his skills so that he can reach 4 stars before he reaches adulthood. Eugene firmly explained that his progress would definitely be halted if he still stayed in the main house. Eugene says he wants to learn other new things, although he is not sure whether he has a talent for magic or not. But if he studied now, then Eugene could see mana in a new light. Learning new things has been a valuable experience for Eugene, and he is sure that it will not be wasted later. Eugene bowed and begged Sir Gilade to grant him permission to study magic at Aeroth. Sir Gilade seemed to be deep in thought. He weighed seriously what was best for Eugene. Finally, Sir Gilade asked Eugene to raise his head and said that he would not hold back Eugene's enthusiasm for learning. But before that, Eugene was asked to promise not to study black magic, because Aeroth has a black tower, and that's where black magicians gather. Indeed, there are no bad rumors about them now, and public opinion about them is also quite good. But Lionheart is descended from Vermouth the Great. Therefore their family has unwritten rules to avoid black magic. Demon King, Demon, Wizard of Black Magic, Eugene knows very well the terrible deeds they have done 300 years ago. So obviously this young man would be asking Sir Gilade not to worry, as he hates black magic too. After obtaining permission and exiting Sir Gilade's room, Eugene heard a knock on the door, and a soft voice asked him to speak for a moment. Eugene smiled and asked why the figure would not come out of his room if he wanted to talk. The figure behind the door explained that she didn't want to come out of the room because she had just finished training and was still full of sweat. The figure that turned out to be Seal asked again if it was true that Eugene was going to Aeroth. Eugene immediately knew that it was Cyan who told this to Seal. Not only that, but Cyan also told Seal that Eugene had reached 3 stars in the White Flame method. The two of them ended up chatting with the wooden door barrier between them. Seal tries to forbid Eugene to go to Aeroth on the grounds that their family can summon great wizards to train them at home. This girl also said that if Eugene was there, then her and Cyan's abilities would soon catch up with him. Eugene was actually grateful to hear that. He was sure the twins' training would be even more exciting later. Eugene also said he hadn't trained with Seal in a long time. Hearing that, Seal was speechless with a red face. She asked if later he wanted to practice again with Eugene, then the young man would not leave. Without hesitation, Eugene replied he would still go. Then Seal asked again how long Eugene would be there. Eugene replies he'll know for sure when he gets there, but it's probably years. Seal sounded sad when he asked why it took so long. And what about Sir Gerhardt, Eugene's biological father? Eugene smiled at that. He was sure his father would be fine, because he is used to living in the main family, and because he now likes hunting, his body has become more athletic. Seal was still trying to seduce him by saying Uncle Jin would be sad. But Eugene did not falter. Instead, he asked how Cyan was when he told Seal this. Seal softly said that when she saw Cyan, she also didn't seem to want Eugene to leave. Even so, Eugene still wants to go. He advised Seal to practice seriously. When Eugene's footsteps moved away, then Seal dared to look out and showed his nose while asking if Eugene really had to go. Without looking back, Eugene waved his hand in response. This irritated Seal even more. In a quiet room, Seal whispered that she didn't want Eugene to leave either. Before leaving, Eugene met personally with Sir Gerhardt, his biological father. Sir Gerhardt advised his son not to associate with naughty children, not forgetting that he also reminded Eugene to keep studying hard. Eugene also reminded his father not to stop training when he left. Sir Gerhardt laughed at that. He stood up from his seat and realized Eugene had grown taller than him. Sir Gerhardt prayed that his son's journey would be smooth. Now, Eugene was standing in front of the teleportation gate. People he knew gathered to see him off. Sir Gilade asked again if it was true that Eugene didn't need bodyguards. With a smile full of pride, Eugene confirmed it. Because now, at least he can defend himself. Sir Gilade smiled sadly. In his mind, this grown man knew Eugene's words were right, considering that his adopted daughter had reached the 3-star White Flame method at such a young age. Eugene looked at the faces of the people who were there one by one. He then told his father to stop crying. Even though earlier his father looked dashing, in the end, he cried like this. Eugene said he would still go even if his father sobbed like that. So Eugene asked his father to let go with a smile. Hearing that, Sir Gerhardt wiped away his tears and smiled brightly even though he still had tears in his eyes. Eugene is relieved after seeing his father's smile. He immediately walked towards the teleportation gate saying, he'll be right back. Now, Eugene arrived at the Magic Kingdom capital, Aeroth, Pentagon. The 5 magic towers form a pentagram centered on the palace. Eugene is driving a flying car while remembering the past. He had gone to Aeroth in his previous life, but now the atmosphere was much different. Now in this country, there is also a floating station. Even among the other magical kingdoms, only Aeroth has a warp gate in the sky. The floating station, which is flown in the sky with various spells, shows the prowess of Aeroth's magic, at the same time helping the business value and convenience of the city. In front of Eugene, there is a young man with a hat who is a Pentagon tour guide. He explained that the Pentagon has 15 floating stations which were creations by Sienna the Wise. Eugene was amazed to hear that. He asked if Sienna had also created the flying car. The young man in the hat confirmed it. He also explained that the car was a magic technology from hundreds of years ago, but they keep repairing it and maintaining it continuously until the accident rate is small. When the tour guide wanted to show the attractions, Eugene immediately stopped him and said he wanted to visit the mansion Sienna the Wise. They immediately flew towards Sienna's mansion. On the way, the tour guide explained that 300 years ago, after returning from Devildom, Sienna became the youngest tower master in Aeroth's history. Therefore, at one point in the city, there is a bronze statue erected in memory of Sienna. The mansion they would visit later was Sienna's residence until her retirement. About 200 years ago, Lady Sienna left a letter saying she wanted to retire, then simply left the mansion. Eugene says that no one knows where Lady Sienna went after that. The tour guide confirmed it. Even though many wizards, Aeroth, and Sienna's students have tried to find and follow in his footsteps, still no one knows Sienna's resting place. Another thing that was most surprising was that Sienna disappeared right on her birthday. The tour guide thought Sienna had gone back to Devildom, because 200 years ago, on that day, it was 100 years since Sienna left Hamel's corpse in Devildom. The tour guide suspected that Sienna had returned there to remember Hamel, and to take revenge on her best friend's name. Then, the tour guide started discussing the love story between Sienna and Hamel. Instantly, Eugene's face turned scary, and he told the leader of the path to be quiet if he still wanted to live. The tour guide immediately changed the subject and said that there was another theory about Sienna's disappearance. It is common knowledge that Sienna really hates black magic and demons, so she continued to criticize the construction of the Black Magic Tower until her retirement. Some have speculated that it was the radical group of dark magicians who pushed for the building of the Black Magic Tower that killed Sienna. At this point, Eugene replies that Sienna couldn't have been killed by an ordinary dark wizard. The tour guide also agreed with Eugene's opinion. At that time, the Black Magic Tower also denied the rumors. Meanwhile, Eugene is deep in thought and realizes that Sienna is impossible for an ordinary dark wizard to kill. But it's a different story if it's a demon king. Eugene knew that Helmuth was still supporting Eroth through the Black Magic Tower. From the demon's perspective, Sienna was their bully, and that reason was enough to kill Sienna. After finally arriving in front of Sienna's mansion, Eugene asked himself if Sienna was really dead. In front of the magnificent mansion, hundreds of people were praying with all their hearts. Eugene asks why there are so many people in front of the mansion. The tour guide explained that they were students who wanted to take the Magic Tower recruitment test. Because they didn't have money, they couldn't enter the mansion. Because the ticket price is very expensive. Eugene asks why it is so expensive. The tour guide answered that there are still many people who want to spend more to enter the mansion. The tour guide also said that there is a myth that says if someone prays in front of the Sienna painting that hangs in the main hall, it is guaranteed that their prayer will be answered. Before they entered the mansion, the guards checked their permits first. After realizing it was the Lionheart family name card, the guard immediately panicked and very politely invited Eugene to enter. When Eugene entered the mansion, the tour guide chose to wait outside the mansion door. After that, the main door was closed. Eugene immediately smiled and said he wanted to see Sienna's lifestyle. Eugene surrounds Sienna's mansion, which he thinks is enormous. Eugene remembers Sienna living in the mansion for 100 years. He remembered they used to talk about this one night before retiring. Sienna asked what Hamel plans for the future. Hamel was stunned. He asked why Sienna suddenly asked this. Sienna said there was no particular reason. Sienna just said they should find happiness later, considering they had been working hard in such a horrible place. Hamel shook his head and replied he didn't know because he had never thought that far. Sienna pointed at the sleeping Malon, saying that the idiot wanted to be a king. Hamel thinks Malon's wish is crazy. Even so, Sienna said to leave it at that, because according to him, humans have the right to dream. Hamel even suspected that Sienna was drunk because she suddenly turned into a gentle, wise person. Sienna immediately cursed in annoyance at Hamel's non-serious response. Hamel asked in return what Sienna's plans were for the future. The girl was suddenly startled and was silent for a moment. Then she said she wanted to live a normal life like everyone else, then married and had children. By now, Eugene, or Hamel, was standing in front of Sienna's large painting. Inside his mind, Eugene said that Sienna should meet a good man, get married, then live in peace. So Eugene wonders why Sienna chose to live alone for 100 years instead. Unknowingly, Eugene's hand advanced and wanted to touch Sienna's painting, but suddenly he was stopped by the mansion's guard. Instantly, Eugene swore in annoyance because the guard interrupted his emotional moment. Eugene turned around and headed to the basement of the mansion because he wanted to see Sienna's huge library, which was located in the basement. As soon as he arrived at the baseman's room, Eugene went straight to the shelves full of neatly lined magic books. Eugene wished Sienna would leave a trail between the bookshelves, but when he was about to touch a book, again a guard appeared and forbade him to take the books. Eugene grew increasingly irritated and was at a loss to think of how to look for clues if he wasn't allowed to touch the books. Then, Eugene remembered his necklace, which suddenly caught his attention. Eugene thought it was unreasonable. He suspected that the necklace might have appeared because it resonated with Hamel's soul, like Tempest the Wind King back then. Eugene believes someone interfered in his reincarnation process, and if that was Sienna's doing, Eugene was sure she would leave some clues. In the end, Eugene returned to standing in front of Sienna's painting that was in the main hall. He spoke in his heart to the painting that he had searched all the rooms in the mansion, but he did not find any clues. Eugene scratched his head in frustration. He didn't understand